What would you do if you discovered a secret about the person you were about to marry, a secret that could change everything? Would you fight for love, or would you walk away? This is the story of Michael, a man who thought he'd found the love of his life in Jasmine, and his mother, Diana, who unearthed a truth that would shake their relationship to its core just 2 days before the wedding. A truth that would lead to heartbreak, betrayal, and, ultimately, a devastating crime. Michael was a man with a bright future, raised in a family that prided itself on tradition and reputation. Jasmine, his fiancée, was the woman he believed completed him. They met at a church charity event, and her warmth and resilience drew him in. To Michael, Jasmine represented hope, a partner who shared his faith and inspired him to dream of a new life together. But Diana, his mother, was never truly supportive. She questioned Jasmine's background and her ability to fit into their family. Diana's disapproval wasn't vocal at first, but it was there in her actions, her questions, and the way she clung to an idea of who her son should marry. Then, in a chance conversation with friends, Diana learned something that changed everything. One of her friends recognized Jasmine's face, not from church, but from a past Jasmine had left behind. A past that, in Diana's eyes, made her unworthy of joining their family. Diana acted quickly, knowing she finally had the means to end the engagement for good. What followed was a series of events that tore apart lives, exposed deep prejudices, and left everyone involved questioning their choices. Love turned into doubt. Dreams became regrets. And what started as a joyful union spiraled into tragedy. This story is one of choices, consequences, and the haunting impact of secrets. It's a story that challenges what we believe about redemption, love, and forgiveness. As we unravel the events that led to the shocking outcome, ask yourself, could this have ended differently? Michael was the kind of man many would envy. Raised in a well-off family, he was given every opportunity to succeed. A career in marketing at a prestigious firm, a network of influential friends, and a home that reflected his affluence. Yet, beneath the surface of his success, Michael was someone who valued connection and empathy. He believed in treating others with respect and often sought to bridge gaps between people, a trait that made him endearing to those around him. At the center of his life, however, was his mother, Diana. Michael shared a close bond with her, one that had been nurtured since his childhood. Diana had always been his confidant and guiding force. Even as he grew into adulthood, her approval meant everything to him. From career decisions to personal relationships, Michael found himself unconsciously gravitating toward her advice, a habit he rarely questioned. Then came Jasmine. They met at a church charity event, where Michael was helping organize donations. She stood out, not just because of her radiant smile but because of her presence. There was a quiet strength about her that intrigued him. Her laughter was warm, her words sincere, and her ability to inspire those around her was nothing short of remarkable. Michael fell for her quickly. Their romance was whirlwind but genuine. Jasmine's faith and her sense of purpose resonated deeply with him. For Michael, she was more than just a partner, she was a symbol of hope and a future built on shared values. Little did he know that this very love would be tested in ways he could never have anticipated. Jasmine's journey was anything but easy. Born into a life of struggle, she knew the harshness of the world from a young age. Her parents passed away during her teenage years, leaving her to navigate life alone. Poverty became her constant companion, and with no family to lean on, Jasmine faced an uphill battle to survive. In a moment of desperation, she made a choice that would shape her life in ways she couldn't fully understand at the time. She entered the adult entertainment industry, not out of desire, but out of necessity. The work was grueling and emotionally draining, but it allowed her to pay her bills and keep herself afloat. Deep down, Jasmine hated what her life had become, and every day, she yearned for an escape. Her turning point came when she encountered a church outreach program that reached into the community. The experience reignited a spark of faith within her, and she began to see a way out. Slowly but surely, she rebuilt her life. She left the industry behind and embraced Christianity with unwavering dedication. With her newfound faith as her foundation, Jasmine worked tirelessly to create a better future for herself. Now, Jasmine was a social worker, using her past struggles to connect with those who felt lost. Her work was her mission, her way of giving back. And then, she met Michael. He wasn't just a man who showed her kindness, he was someone who saw her for who she had become, not the person she once was. To Jasmine, Michael was more than a fiancé, he was a testament to how far she'd come. Their upcoming wedding was more than a ceremony, it was a symbol of the new life she had worked so hard to build. Diana prided herself on her family. She was a woman who believed in traditions, upheld values, and, most importantly, guarded her family's reputation fiercely. Diana had built a life of affluence alongside her husband and was determined to see her son, Michael, continue in the same vein. She envisioned him marrying a woman of equal standing, someone who could uphold their name with pride. On the surface, Diana appeared polite and cordial toward Jasmine, but her true feelings were far from warm. From the moment she met Jasmine, Diana couldn't see past her race and modest background. Although she never voiced her disapproval outright, she questioned Jasmine's ability to truly fit into their family. To Diana, Jasmine was an outsider, and no amount of kindness or faith could change that. Diana's disapproval wasn't just about Jasmine's background, it was rooted in something much deeper. Her beliefs were shaped by an unyielding sense of superiority, her family's legacy was something she believed needed protection. Michael's relationship with Jasmine felt like a threat to everything Diana held dear, but until she had proof of a reason to intervene, she kept her opinions to herself. It began as an ordinary afternoon. Diana, sitting with her close circle of friends in the comfort of her elegantly furnished living room, couldn't help but share her excitement about the upcoming wedding. With pride in her voice, she described the grand plans for Michael and Jasmine's big day, the venue, the guest list, and the union of two lives that, at least in her mind, were never meant to merge. But then, a pause. One of Diana's friends, Sarah, leaned forward, her expression shifting from polite interest to something resembling concern. "Wait," Sarah said, interrupting Diana mid-sentence. "Did you say Jasmine? Is her last name Walker?" Diana nodded, unsure of where this was going. "Yes, that's her. Jasmine Walker." For a moment, Sarah hesitated, glancing around at the others as if weighing whether to continue. Finally, she leaned back and said, "I thought I recognized her face. I've seen her before, but not in a way you'd expect." The room fell silent. Diana's heart quickened, a strange unease creeping in. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice tight. Sarah exchanged another look with the others before continuing, lowering her voice as if someone might overhear. "I'm not sure how to say this, but I've seen her in adult films. Years ago. She had a bit of a name in that industry." Diana's face froze. The words hit her like a blow, and for a moment, she couldn't process what she'd just heard. "That can't be true," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jasmine is a church-going woman. She's a social worker. You must be mistaken." But Sarah stood firm. "I'm certain. I don't forget faces. I'd bet money on it." As the conversation moved on, Diana's mind stayed locked on Sarah's words. She didn't want to believe it, but something gnawed at her, a sinking feeling that demanded answers. That evening, she sat alone in her study, her laptop open in front of her. Hesitant but driven by a need to know, she typed Jasmine's name into a search engine, pairing it with terms she'd rather not think about. It didn't take long. The results flooded her screen, confirming Sarah's claim. Old videos, images, and links connected to Jasmine's past and the adult industry appeared before her eyes. Diana's stomach churned as she clicked through, each piece of evidence a heavier blow to her already crumbling composure. She stared at the screen, anger and disbelief coursing through her. "This can't be the woman my son is marrying," she muttered to herself. "How could he not know? How could she hide this from him?" Her thoughts spiraled as she imagined the implications. To Diana, this wasn't just about Jasmine's past, it was about her son's future. The family's reputation. the shame she believed this revelation would bring. Diana's disapproval of Jasmine had always been rooted in prejudice, but now she felt justified. This, in her mind, was the final nail in the coffin. The next morning, Diana wasted no time. She called Michael and told him to come to her house immediately, her tone leaving no room for argument. When he arrived, she ushered him into her study and closed the door behind them. Her expression was grave, her usual calm veneer replaced with a simmering intensity. "Sit down," she said, motioning to a chair in front of her desk. Michael obeyed, confused but concerned. "What's going on, Mom? Is everything okay?" Without answering, Diana turned her laptop toward him. On the screen was a paused video, one she'd reluctantly saved from her search the night before. She pressed play, and the room filled with the unmistakable sounds of Jasmine's past. Michael's confusion turned to shock. What is this?" he stammered, his eyes fixed on the screen as if trying to convince himself it wasn't real. Diana leaned forward, her voice sharp. "Do you recognize her?" He hesitated, his mind reeling. I don't know. This doesn't make sense." "This," Diana said, her tone cold, "is your fiancée. Jasmine Walker. A porn star." Michael's breath caught. He leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his hair. "No," he whispered. "This has to be a mistake. She would have told me. She's not like this anymore." Diana crossed her arms, her expression hard. "She didn't tell you because she knew what it would mean. She knew you'd never marry her if you knew the truth. And now you do." For a long moment, Michael sat in silence, his mind racing. The woman he loved, the woman he was about to marry, had kept this from him. The betrayal stung, not just because of what she'd done in the past, but because she hadn't trusted him enough to tell him. But even as anger and hurt swirled inside him, another voice rose, a voice that remembered Jasmine's kindness, her faith, her strength. He thought of the woman he'd fallen in love with, the one who had brought light into his life. Then came Diana's voice, cutting through his thoughts like a blade. "Our family cannot be tainted by her past," she said, her words deliberate and firm. "Think about the consequences, Michael. Think about your future. Your children. You can find someone else. Someone who hasn't lived a life like this." Michael looked up at her, his face pale. "I love her, Mom." Diana's gaze softened slightly, but her resolve remained unshaken. "Love isn't enough to erase this. Do you really want this following you for the rest of your life? For the rest of her life? There are plenty of women out there with clean histories, women who wouldn't bring shame to this family." Her words echoed in Michael's mind as he sat there, torn between the love he felt for Jasmine and the weight of what he'd just learned. The room was silent, but the decision he faced was deafening. The revelation had been made, but its impact was only beginning. This was not just a secret, it was a fracture in the foundation of a relationship, a challenge to the trust Michael thought they shared. And for Diana, it was the perfect opportunity to do what she had wanted all along, to end a marriage she never approved of. Michael sat in his living room, the weight of the last few hours pressing down on him. His phone was in his hand, Jasmine's name glowing on the screen. He hesitated, his thumb hovering over the call button. How could he even begin this conversation? The woman he loved, the woman he was about to marry, had kept such a monumental part of her life hidden from him. He felt betrayed, but more than that, he felt lost. Finally, he exhaled deeply and pressed the button. When Jasmine answered, her voice was light, unaware of the storm brewing on the other end. "Hey, love," she said, her tone full of warmth. Michael's voice, however, was cold, distant. "Can you come over? We need to talk." Jasmine paused, sensing the shift in his tone. "Is everything okay?" "Just, come over," he replied, avoiding her question. Minutes later, Jasmine arrived at Michael's house, her usual bright smile replaced with concern. She stepped inside, and the tension in the air was palpable. Michael didn't meet her eyes as he motioned for her to sit down. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Michael sat across from her, his hands clasped tightly together. For a moment, he couldn't bring himself to speak. Finally, he looked up and said, "Why didn't you tell me about your past?" Jasmine's eyes widened in shock, her heart dropping. What are you talking about?" "I know, Jasmine," Michael said, his voice tinged with anger. "I know everything. The videos, your time in the industry. Why didn't you tell me? Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Jasmine's hands flew to her mouth as tears welled up in her eyes. "Michael, Before she could finish, Michael interrupted, his voice rising. "Do you have any idea how this feels? To learn about this from someone else? My mother had to show me. My mother. Do you understand how humiliating that is?" Jasmine's tears began to fall as she struggled to find the words. "I didn't tell you because it's not who I am anymore. That part of my life, it's over, Michael. I left it behind years ago. I didn't think it mattered." "Didn't matter?" Michael's voice broke. "How could something like that not matter?" Jasmine leaned forward, desperation in her voice. "It mattered to me. It mattered enough that I changed my life. I was young, I was alone, and I was desperate. I didn't have anyone to turn to. I didn't do it because I wanted to, I did it because I had no choice." Her words hung in the air, raw and heavy. "Michael," she continued, her voice softer now, "I found faith. I rebuilt myself. I became someone I could be proud of. I became the woman you fell in love with. That's who I am now. That's the only version of me that matters." Michael looked away, his jaw clenched. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to hold on to the woman he'd loved so deeply. But the images, the videos, they were burned into his mind, a stark reminder of what she'd hidden from him. Michael's thoughts swirled as Jasmine's words echoed in his mind. He remembered the first time he'd met her, the way she'd laughed, the way her eyes had sparkled with hope. He remembered the nights they'd spent talking about their dreams, their plans for the future. But now, those memories felt tainted, overshadowed by what he'd learned. His mother's words rang in his ears, "You can't build a life with someone who's kept this kind of secret. She'll bring shame to this family." He looked at Jasmine, still crying across from him, and for a moment, he softened. He could see her pain, her regret. But then, the doubts crept back in. How could he trust her now? How could he marry someone who hadn't been honest with him from the start? "Michael," Jasmine said, her voice trembling, "I love you. I've never loved anyone like this before. Please, don't let my past ruin what we have. I'm not that person anymore. I'm yours." Michael closed his eyes, his heart aching. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to hold on to the life they'd planned together. But the weight of it all, the betrayal, the judgment, the doubt, was too much. The next day, Michael made his decision. He sat down with Jasmine, his expression somber. She already knew what was coming, she could see it in his eyes. "I can't do this," he said quietly. "I can't go through with the wedding." Jasmine's face crumpled as she shook her head. "Michael, please. Don't do this. We can work through it. We can move the date, take some time, anything you need. Just don't end it like this." But Michael was firm. "It's not just about time, Jasmine. It's about trust. It's about everything I thought I knew about you, everything I thought we had. I can't look at you the same way anymore." His words hit her like a blow, and she collapsed into sobs. "I gave you everything, Michael. I gave you my heart. I've spent every day trying to be the woman you deserve." Michael stood, his face filled with anguish. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "But I can't do this." The following days were a blur of cancellations. The venue was notified, the invitations withdrawn. Friends and family whispered, speculating about what had happened. Jasmine, meanwhile, was left alone, drowning in her heartbreak. The life she had built, the love she had cherished, had been torn apart. And now, she was left to pick up the pieces. For Michael, the decision to end the engagement brought no solace. He was left grappling with what he had lost, a love that had felt so real, so pure. Yet, as he sat in the silence of his now empty home, one question lingered: had he made the right choice, or had he let fear and judgment take away the one person who truly loved him? Jasmine sat alone in her small apartment, the silence around her almost deafening. The wedding dress she had once admired so lovingly hung in the corner, now a cruel reminder of a future that would never come. She hadn't left her home in days, barely eating, barely sleeping. The walls that once felt warm and familiar now felt like they were closing in on her. Each passing hour brought a new wave of emotions: grief, anger, regret, all swirling together in a relentless storm. She replayed the confrontation with Michael over and over in her mind. His words echoed in her ears, sharp and cold: "I can't look at you the same way anymore." No matter how much she tried to push them away, they always came back, dragging her deeper into despair. She couldn't understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. Just weeks ago, she had been excitedly planning a wedding, dreaming of a life filled with love and happiness. Now, she was left with nothing but shattered dreams and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. Her past, the very thing she had worked so hard to leave behind, had found its way back into her life, destroying everything she had built. She thought of the years she spent transforming herself, the nights she cried out to God for forgiveness, the countless times she told herself she was no longer defined by her mistakes. But now, it all felt like a lie. If Michael, the man she loved, couldn't see her for who she had become, would anyone ever truly accept her? The days blurred together as Jasmine sank deeper into her depression. She avoided her friends' calls, unable to face their questions or sympathy. Even the thought of stepping outside filled her with dread. The vibrant, hopeful woman she once was felt like a distant memory, replaced by someone she barely recognized. A week later, Jasmine finally summoned the courage to pick up her phone. She wasn't ready to talk to anyone, but the urge to distract herself led her to scroll through social media. She hesitated before opening Michael's profile, knowing it would hurt, but she couldn't stop herself. What she saw made her heart drop. It was a video, posted just hours earlier. Michael was sitting at a beautifully set table, surrounded by his family. His mother, Diana, was at the head of the table, smiling warmly. But it wasn't the setting or the laughter that caught Jasmine's attention, it was the woman sitting next to Michael. A white woman with blonde hair and a polished demeanor. She was laughing with Diana, leaning toward Michael as if they were already a couple. The caption below the video read, "Family dinner, grateful for those who always have my back." Jasmine's stomach churned as she watched the video play on a loop. The smiles, the ease with which Michael seemed to have moved on, it was as if their relationship had never existed. She stared at the screen, her chest tightening. How could he look so happy? How could he sit there, surrounded by the people who had torn them apart, and act like she meant nothing to him? Her mind raced with questions. Had Michael already been seeing this woman? Had Diana orchestrated the entire breakup to ensure he ended up with someone she approved of? The thought made her chest burn with anger. She had loved Michael with everything she had, and now he was sitting there, acting like she never mattered. The anger Jasmine felt began to grow, consuming her thoughts. At first, it was a quiet simmer, a dull ache in the background of her pain. But as the hours passed, it became louder, sharper, until it was all she could think about. She clenched her phone tightly, her jaw set as tears streamed down her face. This wasn't just about my past, she thought bitterly. They were waiting for an excuse to get rid of me. Diana never wanted me in their family. And Michael, he didn't fight for me. He didn't even try. Her thoughts spiraled further as she began piecing together a narrative in her mind. Maybe Michael had never truly loved her. Maybe he had been looking for a way out, and Diana had handed him the perfect excuse. The idea sent a fresh wave of rage coursing through her. Jasmine found herself pacing her apartment, her fists clenched at her sides. The injustice of it all consumed her. She had done everything she could to leave her past behind, to build a life she could be proud of. And yet, it wasn't enough. Her mind kept returning to the video, the smiles on their faces, the new woman sitting beside Michael as if she had taken Jasmine's place. Her love for Michael, once so strong, began to twist into something darker. It wasn't just heartbreak anymore, it was betrayal. And that betrayal lit a fire in her, one that she couldn't extinguish. She felt trapped, like a caged animal with no way out. The anger, the humiliation, the sadness, they all blended together until they became unbearable. Jasmine's world had crumbled, and now, all she could think about was how unfair it all was. She had lost everything, and Michael had moved on as if she had never existed. The rage she felt wasn't just about the breakup, it was about everything she had ever endured. The pain of her past, the judgment she had faced, the love she had fought for, it all boiled over, leaving her with one burning question: why should he get to move on when I'm the one left in pieces? The air was heavy with a silence that seemed to mock Jasmine as she sat in her car, parked across the street from Michael's house. The gun, a shotgun she had purchased days earlier, rested hidden under a blanket in the passenger seat. She had never held a weapon before, much less owned one, but in the haze of her rage and heartbreak, it had felt like a solution, a way to make him understand the pain he had caused her. For hours, she waited. The night crept in, casting shadows across the quiet suburban street. Jasmine's mind raced as she replayed the last few weeks. The cancellation of their wedding. Michael's cold dismissal of her love. And now, the ultimate betrayal, him moving on so easily, as if she were nothing more than a mistake he regretted. The image of him smiling at dinner with that other woman burned in her mind, fueling the fire of her anger. She rehearsed what she would say, her voice trembling as she whispered to herself in the darkness. How could you do this to me? After everything we shared, how could you betray me like this? The words felt hollow, unable to capture the depth of her pain. But she kept repeating them, trying to hold on to a shred of control as the emotions threatened to overwhelm her. As the hours passed, Jasmine's resolve hardened. This wasn't just about Michael leaving her. It was about the judgment, the betrayal, the humiliation she had endured. She was done being the one left in ruins while everyone else moved on. Tonight, she would make him listen. He would feel what she felt. It was nearly midnight when Michael's car finally pulled into the driveway. Jasmine's pulse quickened as she watched him step out, his face lit briefly by the glow of his phone. He looked tired, as if the day had worn him down. For a moment, she hesitated. But then she thought of the other woman, the smug smiles, the dismissive way he had told her their love wasn't enough. And the hesitation was gone. She got out of the car, gripping the blanket-wrapped shotgun tightly in her hands. Michael was halfway to his front door when he heard her voice behind him. "Michael," she called, her tone sharp and filled with barely contained anger. He turned, startled to see her standing there in the dim light of the street lamp. "Jasmine? What are you doing here?" She stepped closer, her movements deliberate. Her voice trembled with a mixture of pain and fury as she spoke. "You moved on. Just like that. After everything we shared, after everything we went through, you're already with someone else? Was any of it real to you, Michael? Or was I just a placeholder until someone better came along?" Michael sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Jasmine, you shouldn't be here. It's late. You need to go home." Her eyes narrowed, the fire in them unmistakable. "Go home? That's all you have to say? After you humiliated me, after you let your mother rip us apart, you think I can just go home like nothing happened?" Michael's expression hardened. He stepped back, keeping his distance. "Jasmine, you need help. This isn't healthy. What we had is over. It's time for you to move on." "Move on," she repeated, her voice rising. "You think it's that simple? You think I can just forget everything we built together because you decided I wasn't good enough? You listened to your mother's lies. You let her destroy us. And now you're sitting at family dinners with some woman who fits your perfect little picture of a wife. Was that your plan all along?" Michael's voice was cold, his words cutting. "You want the truth, Jasmine? Fine. I can't be with someone like you. I can't build a life with someone whose past is so dirty. You were a porn star. My mother was right. You hid who you were because you knew I wouldn't accept it. And she was right, I don't. Jasmine froze, the weight of his words hitting her like a punch to the gut. Dirty, she whispered, her voice cracking. You loved me. You said you loved me. Michael's gaze was icy. I love the idea of you. But the truth? The truth is that you'll always be defined by what you did. And I can't have that in my life. Something inside Jasmine snapped. The pain, the humiliation, the anger, it all came crashing down at once. Her vision blurred as tears streamed down her face. I gave you everything, she said, her voice shaking. I changed my entire life. I built myself up from nothing. And you, she pointed a trembling finger at him, you took it all away. Michael shook his head, his voice dismissive. This is why we're done, Jasmine. You can't handle reality. You can't handle the fact that I've moved on, and you should too. Jasmine's hands trembled as she pulled the shotgun from under the blanket. Michael's eyes widened in shock as she raised it, her grip unsteady but her intent clear. Jasmine, put the gun down, he said, his voice suddenly laced with fear. You don't want to do this. But Jasmine was beyond reason. Her emotions had taken over, drowning out any sense of restraint. You ruined me, Michael. You destroyed everything I had left. And now you're just going to walk away, like I never mattered? Jasmine, stop, Michael pleaded, his voice cracking. This isn't you. But she didn't stop. In a single, chaotic moment, she pulled the trigger. The sound of the gunshot shattered the night, reverberating through the quiet neighborhood. Michael fell to the ground, his expression frozen in a mix of shock and disbelief. Jasmine stood there, the shotgun still in her hands, her chest heaving as the reality of what she had done began to sink in. The man she had loved, the man who had broken her heart, now lay lifeless before her. And with that, the storm inside her finally broke, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. The sound of the gunshot pierced through the stillness of the night, jolting the quiet suburban neighborhood awake. Lights flickered on in nearby houses, blinds were pulled aside, and concerned voices filled the air. A neighbor, cautiously peering through their window, spotted Jasmine standing in Michael's driveway, the shotgun still in her trembling hands. The lifeless body of Michael lay sprawled on the ground, a stark contrast to the serenity that had defined the street just moments before. It didn't take long for someone to call 911. Within minutes, the wail of sirens echoed through the night, growing louder with each passing second. Jasmine remained frozen in place, her mind a whirlwind of shock, regret, and numbness. When the police arrived, their flashlights illuminated the devastating scene. Officers surrounded her, their voices firm but measured as they ordered her to drop the weapon. Slowly, as if in a daze, she complied, letting the shotgun fall to the ground with a dull thud. Handcuffs were placed around her wrists, the cold metal biting into her skin. As she was led away, her tear-streaked face and vacant expression painted a haunting picture. The neighbors watched from their windows and doorways, their hushed murmurs filled with a mix of horror and disbelief. Jasmine was placed in the back of a police car, the weight of what she had done pressing down on her with every passing moment. In that instant, the life she had fought so hard to rebuild was shattered, replaced by the grim reality of what lay ahead. Months later, the trial began, drawing widespread attention from the media and the public. The courtroom was packed, reporters lined the benches, and the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. This wasn't just a trial about a crime, it was a story of love, betrayal, and tragedy that had captured the nation's imagination. The prosecution wasted no time painting Jasmine as a dangerous and unstable woman. They brought up her past in the adult industry, using it as a weapon to discredit her character. Videos and images from that time were submitted as evidence, despite their irrelevance to the crime, with the prosecutor arguing that they demonstrated a pattern of poor judgment and recklessness. She lived a double life, the prosecutor declared during their opening statement. She hid her past, manipulated her way into a relationship, and when her lies were exposed, she lashed out in the most violent way possible. This was not a crime of passion, it was premeditated revenge. Jasmine's defense attorney, however, fought back with equal fervor. They highlighted her transformation, her years of hard work to leave her past behind, and the prejudice she had faced from Michael's family, particularly Diana. The defense painted a picture of a woman who had been pushed to the edge, consumed by heartbreak and rejection after being judged not for who she had become, but for who she once was. Jasmine Walker is not a monster, her attorney argued. She is a human being, a woman who has suffered immensely and made mistakes in her past, mistakes she has spent years trying to atone for. This crime was not the result of premeditation. It was the tragic consequence of a series of events that broke her spirit and clouded her judgment. The courtroom listened intently as witnesses were called to testify. Jasmine's colleagues from her social work job described her as compassionate and dedicated, someone who went above and beyond to help others. Meanwhile, Michael's friends and family portrayed her as deceptive and manipulative, echoing Diana's sentiments about her being unfit to marry into their family. As the trial progressed, Jasmine herself took the stand, her voice trembling as she recounted her life story. She spoke of the hardships that had led her to the adult industry, her struggle to leave it behind, and the love she had found with Michael. Tears streamed down her face as she described the moment she pulled the trigger, calling it the worst mistake of her life. "I loved Michael," she said, her voice breaking. "I loved him more than anything. But that night, I wasn't myself. I was broken. I just wanted him to listen, to understand what he had done to me. I never meant for it to end this way." The trial also reignited broader conversations about forgiveness, redemption, and the societal stigma surrounding women who try to rebuild their lives after leaving industries like Jasmine's. Can we ever truly move beyond our past? After weeks of courtroom drama, the jury reached a decision. On the final day of the trial, the atmosphere in the courtroom was tense. Jasmine sat quietly at the defense table, her hands clasped tightly together as the judge prepared to deliver the sentence. Her attorney had fought tirelessly for leniency, emphasizing her emotional state at the time of the crime, her history of hardship, and the strides she had made to rebuild her life. The prosecution, however, argued that the severity of the crime could not be overlooked. They called it a deliberate act, insisting that Jasmine's past instability and the premeditated nature of her actions demanded the maximum penalty. The judge's voice broke the heavy silence. "Jasmine Walker," he began, "this court acknowledges the complexity of your case. While your actions were born out of deep emotional distress, they resulted in the irreversible loss of a life. After careful consideration, this court sentences you to 20 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 15 years. The words hit Jasmine like a blow. Tears welled up in her eyes as she processed the reality of her fate. The once promising life she had worked so hard to rebuild was now reduced to years spent behind bars. In the gallery, some spectators nodded in approval, believing justice had been served. Others sat in silence, their faces reflecting the weight of the tragedy that had unfolded. Within Michael's family, the fallout was equally devastating. Diana, once so confident in her decisions, now found herself facing backlash from both the public and her own family. Her refusal to accept Jasmine from the start, coupled with her role in exposing Jasmine's past, made her a target of criticism. Many saw her as the catalyst for the tragedy, accusing her of manipulating Michael and pushing Jasmine to the breaking point. Diana defended her actions, insisting she had only been trying to protect her son. "I did what any mother would do," she said, her voice resolute. "I had a duty to ensure my son made the right decision for his future." But not everyone in the family supported her. Michael's father, who had largely stayed silent throughout the ordeal, finally spoke out. "I should have stepped in," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "I saw the tension, the way Diana treated Jasmine. I knew it wasn't fair, but I stayed out of it. And now I have to live with the consequences of that decision." The family's once close bond was fractured, with blame and guilt dividing them. Diana's unwavering belief in her own righteousness only deepened the rift, leaving her isolated even as she tried to maintain a facade of strength. In the end, the aftermath of the crime left no one untouched. Jasmine faced the harsh reality of her actions, her life forever defined by a single, devastating moment. Michael's family grappled with their own role in the tragedy, their lives irreparably changed. And the public, captivated by the story, was left to wrestle with the questions it raised. Can we ever escape our past? How far should we go to protect those we love? And what happens when love, judgment, and betrayal collide? The story of Jasmine and Michael was not just a tale of heartbreak and crime, it was a reflection of the complexities of human relationships, the power of forgiveness, and the devastating consequences of secrets left unspoken. This story raises difficult questions. Was Michael justified in ending the relationship? Did Jasmine's omission truly betray his trust, or was it her right to leave her past behind? Diana claimed to act out of concern, but was her interference driven by prejudice? Could compassion have prevented the tragedy? These questions highlight the complexity of love, trust, and forgiveness. Jasmine's life was defined by growth, yet her past became a weapon. Michael and Diana's judgment ignored who Jasmine had become, reducing her to old mistakes. This is a reminder of how judgment can blind us to humanity, unraveling lives in its wake. Jasmine's journey of redemption was crushed by prejudice. Society often speaks of forgiveness but struggles to grant it. Her story challenges us to confront biases and reconsider how we view those who seek to move forward. The story of Jasmine and Michael is a tragic reflection on love, judgment, and redemption. What would you have done in Michael's place? Could this tragedy have been avoided with understanding? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories exploring the complexities of human relationships.